Hey folks, welcome back to another edition of Passionate Talk. I'm your host, Gary Karp, and this week I'm going to be talking with Jim Bray of Jim Bray Artworks. Jim is a set designer, model maker, prop designer, makeup artist, and all-around good guy. He's going to talk to us today about his journey and how he discovered art, the toxic work environments that he had, how 9/11 impacted him on his career, and also talk to us about his leadership style and what he calls paradigm paralysis. So pull up a chair, grab a cup of coffee, and stick around for a while. Have a cigarette, go.
All right.
Smoke them if you got them.
All right. I was just worried about the sound of the cars going by. When one approaches, I'll pause.
For such a faraway place that's like 3 stones away from being nowhere, you have the busiest street in the world.
I know, it's ridiculous. It never used to be like this. Growing up here, you could ride your bike on the main road and not worry about it,
I've known you for almost about 15 years now, and the one thing I know that you're extremely passionate about is your artwork, your building, your sculpting,
Yep.
and you are one of the most incredible sculptors and artists I've ever seen.
You're too kind.
How did you come to that? How did that become a passion of yours?
That goes all the way back to when I was a kid. I was just, as long as I can remember, drawing, putting things together, little craft projects. My mom was a big influence in that. She was really behind all of the artistic side of what I like to do. And she was very encouraging with that sort of thing. So I just was constantly doing different things, trying different things, picking up every art book I could find and gobbling it up. One Christmas they gave me one of these artists' starter kits, and it had all the charcoals and pencils and instruction books and paper and paints. I mean, this thing was loaded.
Oh, cool.
And I just dove into it with a fervor. And I was always into movies. And I think what got to the makeup part of it was seeing the film Planet of the Apes and seeing the amazing makeup and wanting to figure out how did they do that? How did they make these people look like apes?
Now, this was the Roddy McDowall 1970,
Yes.
Charlton Heston.
Yes.
Damn you blew it up. You get your filthy paws off me, you damn dirty
Take your
ape, right?
stinking paws off me, you damn dirty ape. So, I was just fascinated, and I couldn't get enough about it. So I started going to the library. Of course, we had no internet then. Yes, I'm old. We started going to the library and picking up books on makeup and The Man of a Thousand Faces and all that kind of stuff. And so I got into that aspect of art as well, because I really wanted to learn, how did they do this? Because it was like magic to me.
So what would you say the passion of art and your just insatiable quest for knowledge on how to do these things, how do you think that affected you as you were moving into being a teenager and a young adult and you were looking at your first jobs? How did you think that influenced where you ended up working?
Well, it just drove me to seek, and it drove me to learn, and learning never stops. I mean, even at my age, learning never stops. Every day, you find out something else, and that's how you've got to look at this kind of work. You cannot take the attitude that I know all there is to know. I mean, you cannot think like that.
And I think that's probably the most important lesson for everybody, regardless of what your passion is, regardless of what you're doing.
Absolutely.
You can't stop learning. Learning is the key. Now, I know that you have worked for some incredible organizations and your makeup work for some movies and television shows and web fan series. So tell the listeners just a little bit about where you've worked and where your work is showcased so they know the level of talent that we're dealing with here.
Oh, gosh, you're going to embarrass me.
Yes, I'm putting you on the spot. Deal with it.
You're going to embarrass me. You're going to make me brag, which I'm, okay. Like they say in Texas, it ain't bragging if it's true. Gosh, where to start? Well, I began doing all kinds of weird stuff, working for the St. Albans Recreation Department, St. Albans, Vermont. And they had an incredibly creative guy there, Jim Hilton, who would come up with these insane projects. We built the world's largest ice cream sundae, the world's largest snowman, the world's biggest pancake, just all kinds of crazy things like that. and he pulled me in at the beginning of a haunted house project that he was working on. We had this huge Victorian schoolhouse that was sitting abandoned, and he found out that I knew how to do makeup. He wanted to show up at one of the initial kickoff meetings in some makeup, so he had me give him some werewolf makeup, and pulled me into the organization that way. And then he had me start drawing up like designs for the giant snowman. How would we accomplish this? What would be the mechanics behind it? And he knew that I was not just an artist, but kind of a nuts and bolts guy too. So he really took advantage. He exploited my ability to think outside the box, I guess.
So after St. Albans, I know, and just because I know you don't like to brag about yourself, I'm going to brag on you because our listeners deserve to know the level of talent and the level of passion you have for these things. You have done an extremely scale model of the Hoover Dam, which
Yep.
blows me away every time I see it. I think it was like 1/27th scale, you said, or something like that?
It's called Z scale, which is about as small as you can get.
A Z-scale model of the Hoover Dam,
Yep.
and you've done some work for the military museum, and your work has also been in the Smithsonian Institution in Washington D.C. and it's
I've
in
got a little shuttle model there. Yeah.
and Disney and Islands of Adventure, I believe.
Yep. Uh, and Universal Studios in Florida too. I'm looking forward to in a couple of weeks inspecting my work because we're going to be taking a vacation. We're going to be going down to the World Showcase.
Oh, really? That's cool. Are you going to stand next to it going, "This is my work,
I
folks.
made
This
this.
is me."
Yeah, I made this. So I'm gonna. Well, there are some what appear to be wooden columns in the Moroccan marketplace, and I sculpted what's called the plug, which they make a mold of, and then they make a bunch of copies. And I sculpted the plug for those wooden columns. So I'm looking forward to going down and seeing how they're holding up.
You're also one of the very few people who was actually commissioned by the British government that can create or have created an exact replica of the Rosetta Stone.
Well, it's not exact, and there's a reason why. When you're making a copy, you have to change it, I think about 10 to 15%, so that it can be recognized as a knockoff. So for ADA purposes, it couldn't stick out of the wall too much. So we had to reduce its thickness by about half. And in the text, I included the names of my kids in Greek. So
That is so cool. That is so cool. I love that.
and my name is in there too somewhere, and it's also all in Greek in the Greek section on the text.
So tell us, how did that come about? I mean, were you working for a company at the time and they came in and they said, "Show me your artists," or how did that happen?
Well, it was rather informal from my end, but then I found out later there was a lot more to it. But I was working for a company called Sightline Studios, and they were down in Florida, and they had been commissioned by the International Spy Museum in D.C. They were doing a whole section on code breaking, and they felt that the Rosetta Stone was such a critical piece to the story about code breaking. So they came to me in the shop one day and they said, "Look, we've got this thing. Would you like to work on it? Do you feel up to the task?" And I said, "Well, what is it?" They said, "It's the Rosetta Stone." And I went, "Pardon me?" You can't be serious. Really? I get to make a copy of the Rosetta Stone? Yeah, let me think. Yeah. So,
Hmm.
so we began work on it, and then I found out later that they had to file a bunch of papers on who is this guy that's making this copy, and they had to send it to the British Museum, and so that they would be aware that a copy was being made, and so they have a dossier apparently. So I began work on it, and they were nice enough to let me work from my shop at home because I could get up early in the morning with my coffee and get started on it and work all day into the evening, and it took about a month to knock this thing out.
So I know that you've worked for a lot of companies, a lot of organizations, and you've had some very interesting experiences with superiors. I was wondering if you could share some of those stories and how that impacted your work and your enjoyment of the work and what you ultimately did with that toxic work environment?
Toxic is a good word. I have found that when you pull a lot of egos together in one room, that there's a lot of Clash of the Titans kind of stuff that happens. Whether it's deserved or not, it does happen. And I'm not without my ego, of course. I mean, no artist is not without their ego. But, I try to get along and I try to do my best and I try not to be a jerk. But I also know there's a right way and a wrong way to do things. There's a certain set of applied methods that must be followed if you're to be successful. And you come across people who, by virtue of just not what they know, but who they know, end up in a higher position. And they might not necessarily fully understand what it takes to get the job done. But they're in charge, and so they throw their weight around.
So it's the
Yeah, I was about to go there. So it's basically the Peter principle in action, meaning you are not allowed. The Peter principle, in essence, states that you do not allow people to rise any higher than your personal level of incompetence.
I heard the Peter Principle stated as each person will rise to their highest level of incompetence. So you'll take a wonderful, in your situation, you'll take a wonderful sculptor, artist who does amazing artwork, and you will put him in charge of a team, even though he has no leadership or administrative capabilities.
Right. Well, I was in charge of nearly 100 people, myself and another fella. His name was Doug Rucker. Great guy. He's also an artist, but he was more of a nuts and bolts guy, or he decided to handle the nuts and bolts, how does it all go together kind of aspect of the art department, and I was that other guy, the artsy fartsy guy that looks at things and says, okay, you're at a stopping point, don't do any more, or have you thought about putting this here and painting this like that, and the guy that would kind of poke the other artist's brains and just get them thinking. And so Doug and I shared the department at this one company, and we had some project managers who had little to no experience in the actual art field. They were just there to kind of drive the project forward, and everything was going great. We figured out how to motivate our people. We were coming in ahead of schedule and under budget. The quality of the work was fantastic, and for whatever reason, upper management decided to call in this guy that I had worked with at another company. Let's say he reminded me of House.
The TV show and the character that was played by what's the actor's name? Hugh Laurie.
He was like that. He was abrasive. He didn't have what Hugh Laurie's character had, which was an incredible base of knowledge. This guy was just a know-it-all and a blowhard, and everybody knew it. And they wanted to bring him in as kind of an overall manager to make sure that all projects were driving together so that we would get a good net result. Well, Doug and I are just pushing along. Everyone's humming along happily. Everyone's doing great. He observed for about a week, and then he came up to Doug and I, and he said, "You don't crack on your people enough." Why do we need to crack on them? They're doing great. Well, I'm telling you, you need to crack on them. Why do we need to crack on them? Everything's fine. We're ahead of schedule. I'm telling you, if I don't see you start cracking on these people, it's going to be hell to pay. The guy was a hammer, and he wanted us to be hammers, and that's not how we worked. We knew that we wouldn't get success by being a hammer, that you catch more flies with honey than you do with vinegar.
Absolutely.
And he just couldn't see that. And so Doug and I agreed, we're just, status quo, man. Let's just stick with what we're doing. It's working. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. It wasn't too long after that they called a staff meeting. Now, usually they say all department heads come to the conference room. But this time they said there will be a meeting in the conference room. We request the following attend. And they named all these department heads and people except for Doug and I. But they did call in this new kid that we had just hired, who, before he worked for us, was making pizzas.
Well, there is a certain artistry to making pizza.
True, but wait, it gets better. So they called this kid in, and Doug and I looked at each other, and we went, uh-oh. So the meeting lasted about 2 hours, and everyone comes back out to the floor, and the kid comes up to us, and he's shuffling his feet, and he's not looking us in the eye, and he goes, guys, so I was just in that meeting, and And Doug bursts out immediately. He goes, "So you're the new head of the department, right?" And he kind of looks up at us, startled. He said, yeah. All right, boss. You say jump, we'll ask how high. What do you need?" And he was floored.
So when that happened, how did you feel? I mean, here you are, you've got all this experience, you've got all this talent, you've been running this department of 100 people, that running like clockwork, a well-oiled machine, on time, under budget, and then for a reason of personality clash with the bigger boss, you now find yourself in a subservient position. How did you feel about that?
Well, it was an interesting mixture because I looked at Doug and Doug looked at me and we were like, we get our hands dirty now. Because before we were running around managing everybody and we didn't have much time for projects of our own. And there was a ton of paperwork. So some of it, well, at first we were angry that they went around behind our backs and stuck the knife in. But the other side of that, the other edge of that sword was, this is not a hill we're going to die on. We're going to thrive on this hill because now we get to do what we love and we don't have the paperwork. So my next question to our new boss was, is our pay going to change? He said, well, no. And I said, awesome. Well, what do you want us to start on? He thought we were going to holler and yell and scream and have a fit and make a show of it. The way Doug and I handled it was to go, fine, okay, fine. We get to do the work we love and we get to keep our manager's pay. Hell yeah.
I think there's a great lesson to be learned in the way that you handled that. And it goes back to the old cliche, when life hands you lemons, make lemonade. Here was a situation that you were a supervisor, you were in charge of 100 people, and then all of a sudden, through no fault of your own, you found yourself demoted. And instead of yelling, screaming, moaning, making a scene, you said to yourself, what is great about this situation? And you went, I get to play again. I get to create art again. This is wonderful. And that's a great lesson for anyone in the work field or any entrepreneur to think about and to really learn that you've got to take the bad situations and find the good in it. You've got to find the silver lining in the dark cloud.
And this isn't the first time I've seen this kind of thing where you get someone in charge and rather than just sit back and go, man, this is running great, I get to just babysit a little. This is going to be a cushy job. Instead, he ended up making more work for himself. What he didn't like about us was we were confident in what we were doing. Every morning with a bag of Hershey's chocolates, and I dropped some kisses on everybody's workstation.
So you kissed everyone in your department?
I kiss everyone in my department. I'd go around in the morning, and I would ask 2 questions. How's it going? What do you need? And then I wouldn't bother him again until the end of the day. How'd it go today? And I would just check in the morning, and I'd check in at night.
It sounds a lot like your management style is what I was listening to a podcast a few days ago, and this woman who was talking about management styles and leadership styles, and she said, we need to lead from a place of guidance, not a place from fixing. That a lot of people believe being a leader is fixing things. So when people come to them with a problem, they go, well, you're doing it wrong. You need to do it this way. This is the way to do it. When the proper way of leading people, whether you're in management or whether you're a coach or whether you're a captain of industry, is to say, well, how does that make you feel? What is the problem here? Maybe you should try it this way. Is there another option that you can do? And just ask them questions so they get the answers themselves. And that empowers the worker or the other person and really makes them feel good about themselves. It seems like you had the proper management style. And
it's how I roll, man. That's how I work. And the thing is, you frame questions in such a way that it occurs to them.
Exactly.
And then when it feels like it's, and here's why that works. When it feels like it's your idea, then you feel that little boost. You know, you feel that little energetic boost that, hey, I just had an epiphany. You know, so you lead, what you do is you lead people to an epiphany. You help them to realize where they might be off the path or they might be off the rails. And you get them back on the rails under their own steam. And that gives them an energetic boost. It shores them up. It makes them realize that they can think. They don't have to have people think for them. You want people making intelligent and informed decisions. So you bring them the information, lead them to the epiphany, and then get the hell out of their way. You know, Teddy Roosevelt had this great saying: a wise man hires the best people for a job and then leaves them the hell alone so that they may do it. And that's how I like to work, and that's how it gets done, and that's the best way I think to lead.
So you're getting the plum jobs, you're getting the fun jobs, you're getting the same pay you got as management, only now you can get more creative. But eventually the tide turned.
And then 9/11 happened. And I remember that morning vividly. I always had my radio on my workbench tuned into talk radio. There was this program in the morning that would come out of Gainesville that I loved to listen to. And they interrupted it, and all of this stuff is happening. And I get my wife on the phone, and I said, turn on the TV on the news. Something major is happening. And she turns on the TV just in time to see the second plane hit the second tower. And so we took the next day off. They sent everyone home. We go back to work the following day. The phone begins to ring. And it's other projects that we had in the pipe that were in the planning stages, pre-production. Things hadn't been signed off yet. They were as good as gold, but we just needed that final go-ahead. And all these projects, I don't know, about $7 or $8.5 million worth of work. And one by one, they're going, you know what, things are kind of weird right now. We're going to pull this project in-house. You know what, we decided to back burner this because we're having to beef up security, and that's where the money's got to go. So all of these projects just gone. And we didn't know what the hell we were going to do. So he kept doing this. Well, in about 8 months, they went belly up and shut the doors. It was over. We went from a Fortune 500 company to doors shut in about 8 months.
Now, 9/11 ended that company, so you find yourself unemployed again. What did you do then? How did your beliefs, and what were those beliefs that said to you in yourself, look, I'm good, I know I'm going to get this going?
There were a couple of companies that didn't let that beat them down. And so I went around to those other companies. So you walk in with a folder full of pictures of what you've recently worked on, and you go, are you needing help? Oh, we're always needing help. What have you been working on? You throw the pictures out on the table. Oh, you were working on that? Oh, we saw that. That was great. Oh, this is nice. When can you start?
So what you did basically during this time is you always kept your portfolio up to date.
Oh, yeah.
You didn't worry, you didn't fret, you had pre-prepared for that moment, so you just grabbed your portfolio and hit the brick, so to speak, and said, here's what I can do, what could I do for you? It definitely sounds like you've had your fill of toxic bosses and toxic work environments.
Oh my God.
You persevered, and you actually started Jim Bray Artworks, which is still up and running and doing work today, and is highly sought out. I mean, as we spoke before, you're doing prop work, you're doing makeup work for television shows and independent web series, and so it seems that you're thriving. I know that there are a lot of people out there that may be in a bad toxic situation or have a boss that they just can't get along with. Maybe they're thinking that the four walls of their cubicles are closing in on them. So
it can certainly feel that way, yeah.
What piece of advice would you give these people to, number one, deal with this situation, and number two, if they are thinking about taking the leap and starting their own company and following their passion, what's the one piece of advice would you give to these people for handling these situations?
Illegitimati non carborundum.
Okay, can we do that in English, please?
Yeah, no, it's Latin. Don't let the bastards grind you down. It's a very old phrase, and I live by that. Don't let the bastards grind you down. You cannot allow them to kick your legs out from underneath you. Just don't. When you're at the bottom, there's nowhere to go but up. Seriously. Because I've been there, and I know what the bottom looks like. It's not a place you want to stay. So you make a plan. You figure out, what is it I can do? What is it I need to do? What do I need to pull together? How do I make this happen? When you're at the bottom, you go to work and try to figure out how to climb out. You look for those handholds, and you dig your way out of the bottom.
I couldn't agree with you more. That is, once again, a great piece of advice for people to remember. I'd also throw in that failure is not what we think it is. So many people would have looked at your situations and said, well, I failed.
Failure is education. There is education in failure. If you choose to accept it as a lesson, that's the thing. And there are a number of people who continue to do the same things over and over, expecting a different result. Einstein calls that insanity.
Absolutely.
There's a thing I call paradigm paralysis, and there are so many companies that suffer from this. Well, that's not how we do it. Yeah, but have you tried? Have you tried a different way? Well, no, that we've never done it that way, and we're not going to start now. And when I see people thinking like that, it just blows my mind,
I also like to think of failure. Failure isn't final. Failure is simply an unexpected result. It doesn't mean that you failed or that you're a failure. You just got a result you were not expecting. Just because something didn't work and you got an unexpected result, that's not failure. That's actually success, because now you know what not to do. There's a story that I love about Thomas Edison.
I was hoping you'd say this. Yeah, I was waiting for that to work in.
Thomas Edison, of course, invented the electric light bulb. It took him over 10,000 hours to get it right. And he was asked by a reporter one day how he kept going after failing for 10,000 tries. And Edison looked at the reporter and said, I didn't fail 10,000 times. I just found 10,000 ways that didn't work. And that's something we all have to keep in mind, and we all have to remember as we're following our passions and we're moving towards manifesting our dreams and the world and our reality the way that we want it.
I absolutely love that story, because it's a story of perseverance. You just have to keep pushing. You have to keep fighting. You have to keep pushing. You have to remain determined. Keep your eye on the goal, and don't let anything slide you away from it.
We're getting so many good lessons that our listeners can take and apply in a practical way.
Right.
And what I'd like to do right now is to give you the opportunity to tell people about Jim Bray Artworks, about how to contact you if they do want a piece of sculpture, or they do need some scenery done, or they're putting together a show of their own and they do need some prop work done. How could they get in touch with you?
Well, you have to be on Facebook. I don't have a web page right now, but what I do have is a really nice Facebook page, and it's just Bray Artworks.
Okay, so that would be facebook.com/Bray Artworks?
Correct. And there's a ton of photo galleries there. You can communicate directly with me. You can message me. Go have a look around. There's a lot of fun stuff in there. The Hoover Dam model that Gary was talking about is in there. There's pictures of the Rosetta Stone, and the process I went through to make it is in there. There's stuff from Popeye and Bluto's Bilge Rat barges at Universal Studios that I did a lot of scenic work for is in there. There's a whole bunch of stuff from Toon Lagoon that I worked on for that project. There's, oh lordy, all kinds of museum stuff that I've worked on, stuff for the Spy Museum and the Smithsonian, and a couple of museums in Italy, and some stuff I did for a museum in Germany.
So folks, if you're on Facebook, and I think everybody in the world is on Facebook, go check out facebook.com/Bray Artworks. Jim is an amazing, amazing artist. And Jim, I do want to thank you for spending some time today and sharing some stories about your work experiences and how you move through them. So, Jim, I'd like to thank you very much for the time. This has been a lot of fun. And
yeah, it was fun.
We will talk soon.
Absolutely.
Take care. Wow. That was a lot of fun. I hope you enjoyed that conversation with Jim as much as I did. I loved hearing his stories, and I love the fact that he kissed his employees each and every day. Folks, if you want to be a leader, you need to be able to treat your people with respect. Value them. Tell them what to do. Let them do their job. Don't interfere with them. That's the way a leader is. A leader guides by questions, by tickling the brains of his people, not by telling someone how to do their job. Well, that's this week's episode of Passionate Talk. Until I see you next week, follow your dreams and passions and manifest the life you choose.